some people, so the cover of The Atlantic this week had an image, a Reservoir Dogs image of Putin, Xi Jinping, Erdoğan, Modi in India, and the title of the cover was "The Bad Guys Are Winning." And it seems that we're entering an era of diminishing human rights and religious freedom around the world. How do we, a part of what Open Doors does is tell the story of what's happening to Christians around the world. And we give a reality check, I think, into Western Christian cultures. Are we seeing a return to business as usual, i.e. a sort of Roman context? I mean, would you say, that's a big question, following the trajectory of dominion, or is there an opportunity for a reality check for Christians in the West?
I think that you mentioned Erdoğan and you mentioned Modi, and I think that they're particularly interesting because they serve as a reminder to people in the West, whether they are Christian or more particularly not Christian, that Western values are not universal. No. They are contingent. They are bred of a particular cultural seedbed, which is deeply Christian. And in the case of Modi and in the case of Erdoğan, it's clear that what they're reacting to is an understanding of society that the primacy of the West for kind of 2 centuries, its global primacy, has enabled people in the West to assume that concepts such as, for instance, the secular, the idea that there is a neutral space called the secular, and that there are things called religions which are separate and distinct from the secular, that this is something that everyone can accept. It's just kind of, part of the way that everything is. But what Modi and Erdoğan are doing is reminding us that there are actually very, very different ways of seeing the world, that this understanding of the secular and the religious is bred of, ultimately it goes back, I suppose, ultimately to Jesus and the coin of Caesar, render unto Caesar what is Caesar, unto God what is God. It goes through Augustine, the city of God, the city of man, this idea that there are rival dimensions, the fallen world of the saeculum, the religio, the bond that joins the church to the timeless purity and eternity of heaven, that these are theological dimensions that in the 21st century, the theological quality of these concepts has been forgotten. And so we just assume that they're kind of sociological constants that everyone can share. But in India, that's not the case. The secularism that defines the Indian Republic is a legacy of the British period. And what Modi is doing is basically kind of trying to wash Hindu India of that kind of Western Christian British legacy. And likewise in Turkey, what Erdoğan is trying to do is to get rid of the kind of the concept of secularism that Ataturk famously introduced. With Xi Jinping, China, of course, is a civilization older than that of Christendom. It has its own incredible reservoir of concepts, of ways that society can be framed that owes nothing to the West. Putin's the interesting one because, of course, Putin rules the Third Rome. But it's a reminder of the way in which Latin Christendom has evolved in very different ways to Orthodox Christendom, and that the relationship between Caesar and Church in Byzantium and then in due course in Moscow took the course of Christianity in those realms on a rather different path that medieval Christianity and then the Reformation took the West. And I think it serves to remind us in the West not to be culturally arrogant about this.
So, tell the church not to be culturally arrogant.
No, I think the church should be culturally arrogant because the church thinks it's all true.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. If you think it's true, that you should be absolutely upfront about it. But I think that you should lay claim to it.
Lay claim to it.
Yes.
Be bolder.
Yes.
Yeah, very good.